Hey guys, iKailaKai here, and this is going to be a video on sealed pack battles. Now, a lot of the times we think that we just open up packs, we use the good cards in there, and then if we win, we were lucky, if we lose, we were unlucky. But there is actually a lot of skill to it. In this video, I want to talk about how you can deck build and play to maximize your odds of winning in sealed pack and pre-release events. Also, sorry, I have to do the YouTuber stuff. This is actually a shortened version of an article that's on the Patreon now. The article goes into more depth on the concepts that I'm going to be talking about, as well as into some concepts that I felt like were a bit too boring or a bit too long for this video. Feel free to check that out if you want to have the full overview of sealed pack battles, as I'll also be putting my full thoughts on every single card in OP08 tomorrow. If you'd be so kind to like, subscribe, and let me know if this helped you with winning your pre-release events or sealed pack events in the next coming weeks or months or even years, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Enjoy the video. Now, to preface, in Japan we don't have pre-release events. We have sealed pack battles and the rules are slightly different. However, the function in which the cards work is generally the same. I'll be focusing on sealed pack battles using the Rainbow Luffy, but the concepts that are in this video, such as how to attack, how to choose the cards in your deck, will apply to pre-release events as well. If you want to have a more in-depth look at specific leaders to choose for your pre-release events, as I know that that's a big factor, I actually think that RtressTCG's video that he posted a couple days ago is very good. So I'll put that in the comments for you to check out. That being said, I am also going to be making my own separate video, not on the leaders, but on the cards specifically in OP08 that you might not think about for pre-release and sealed events, and that should be coming out tomorrow, so look out for that. This video will be going holistically over the entire format so that the video can be referred back to at the start of any set when you're preparing for your pre-release or for any sort of sealed pack battles. The main difference between Asian and global sealed battles is that the packs actually have a different number of cards in them. In Japan, we have 6 cards per pack and 1 rare per pack, and we have 8 packs that we fight with, totaling in 48 cards that we get to choose 30 of to play with. In the global version, you are given 6 packs with 12 cards per pack, with 2 rares per pack, and you are given a pool of 72 cards, of which you choose 40 cards to play with. Now, what this actually means is that in the Asian version, you have to choose 62.7% of your cards, and in the global version, you have to put in 55.5% of this. What this means holistically is that the global version with English cards will tend to have slightly stronger decks because you have more cards to choose from, and you're not forced to take as many bad cards just to fill out space in the deck. What this can end up meaning is that you'll have more opportunities for combos within your deck, such as the small Ichiji and large Ichiji combo from all your packs, but you might draw it less due to the larger pool of cards that you're drawing from every turn. First, before we dive into the contents of how to deck build, I want to touch on the big difference between sealed battles and pre-release. While, of course, in pre-release events you can bring your leader, sealed pack battles you have the Rainbow Luffy. The important effect that's written on this card is that this leader is treated as a card with all card names, types, and attributes according to the rules. Now, what this means on a very surface level, of course, is that if a card, for example, like Birdcage, says that your leader needs to be Don Quixote do Flamingo to use the effect, then your leader is technically Don Quixote do Flamingo, so he can use the effect. In pre-release events, obviously, this won't work unless you physically were to bring the leader Don Quixote do Flamingo. In this way, actually, there's some cards you might not think about that are really strong in sealed pack battles that might not necessarily be strong in pre-release battles. If a card says, if you have a blank, then blank, for example, Kung Fu Jugong, your leader is actually a Kung Fu Jugong because it doesn't specify that the other Kung Fu Jugong needs to be a character. Your leader is technically Kung Fu Jugong, so therefore it can use the effect. Read the card very carefully. In constructed formats, we can account for the sorts of cards that exist. We know what the meta generally looks like, and then we can think, okay, Doflamingo's a problem, so how do I tech for that? I find cards that can deal with 2 cards in 1 turn, and then use those to sort of slow down the pace of the game. In sealed pack battles, you don't have the luxury of having a massive card pool to choose from, so therefore, there tends to be less removal. Removal is very limited because there are very few characters in the game that remove on play with high value, and there are also very few events in general in a set. So what this means is that before you think about the effects that a card has, the one most important thing is to be able to fight on the board. If you can fight on the board, then you can gain advantage because your board stays and the opponent's doesn't. What this means is having a high power line is very strong in this format. Therefore, vanillas are some of the strongest card in this format. Now, for those who don't know the terminology, a vanilla is a statless monster with the highest possible power for its cost threshold. If it's a 4 cost character, the highest possible power it could have is 6,000. 5 cost 7,000, 6 cost 8,000. By having these sorts of higher power thresholds, because there's very few out of hand removal cards, these things tend to stick to the board, and having a higher power makes it harder for the opponent to take it back. Therefore, by playing multiple vanillas in a row and utilizing them well, you accrue minor advantages over the course of the game by merit of the opponent needing to hit higher to take your characters if they choose to. The second type of card that you absolutely want to be putting into your deck are 2000 counters. Of course, this is a given, everyone knows this, but we need to understand what having less 2000 counters in a format like this actually entails. Now, a standard deck will have about 12 2000 counters in a deck. In a 30 card deck, that would mean roughly having 7.2, so about 7 2000 counters in deck will feel the same as having 12 in a standard deck. For a 40 card deck, you'll want 9 to 10 2000 counters to make it feel like 12 in a standard deck. Obviously, this will very rarely ever happen, and if it does, you might just win, because generally people get very few 2000 counters. What this means is that people have very little counter in total, making it easier for you to take not only their life, but their board. Maximizing the number of counter cards in your hand and playing in a way that reduces the opponent's counter cards in their hand will slowly accrue an advantage and inevitably help you win the game. One of the most important concepts to extrapolate from the lack of 2000 counters is that hitting at 6000 power is extremely strong. As such, 4 cost 6000 power vanillas have really high value. If you can manage to keep hitting at 1000 power over the target that you're hitting for the entire game without sacrificing your play, for example, on 6 stone, you'd rather just play a 6 cost and hit with 5000 than to force yourself to play a 5 cost and hit with 6000. You're going to want to play on curve, but when you have the opportunity to split your attacks between 5000, 7000, or 6000, 6000, generally choosing the 6000, 6000 is more painful as there are less 2000 counters in the game. Also, in the same vein as 2000 counters, blockers can effectively be infinite counter for one attack, so putting in all of the blockers that you get is also very good. Now, I generally, in a 30 card deck, like to have around or above 32,000 total counter in the deck. For a 40 card deck, this would be about 43,000 counter. I will preface, for a normal deck, do not think like this, because there are many different effects in the game, and some leaders that can recur resources or counter in very unique ways won't need as much counter. But in this format, where people are playing with these very simple decks, knowing the total counter that you want to have is a very good benchmark to sort of understand if you'll be feeling pain in the late game trying to defend the opponent's attacks. Usually with just 1000, 2000 counters, you won't be able to reach this 32,000 or 43,000 counter threshold. So what you need to be adding are counter events. But there are a lot of bad counter events. Some counter events are very counterintuitive, like the Meteor Strike of Love, and then there are also some cards like Shave that give you plus 2000, and the second effect is very hard to use. Cards like Shave that'll unconditionally give you the counter are great to put in just because they're extra counter for only one card. Knowing which events are actually needed, using this total counter as a benchmark to know if you might feel forced to put it in, is a good way to sort of adapt and mold your deck. The next thing to consider that you almost never consider for a constructed deck is card rarity. Card rarity is actually very interesting because obviously you'll get a ton of common cards, you'll get some uncommon cards, a few rare cards, and then if you're lucky, a couple of super rare cards. The important thing to know about these card rarities is that generally the stronger cards tend to be higher in rarity. This is true, but not necessarily always. If you draw, for example, a searcher, if you don't have good targets for that searcher, despite the card being a rare, it might just be worse than a random 5 cost 6000 common that the effect is just not usable. Moreover, knowing the number of blockers and 2000 counters that are common in a set are very important. For example, in OP07, there were 5 common 2000 counters, but in OP08, there's only 1. Obviously, I'm going to go over OP08's card pool a bit more in depth in the next video, but just as an example, we're taking this. In OP07 sealed battles, you'd get a reasonable number of 2000 counters that you could play with, but in OP08, that's simply not the case. By knowing that there's less 2000 counters in the game, not only does it mean that you have less defense and maybe you have to adapt the way that you play, not letting in as many 5000 attacks, but it also changes the way that you can attack the opponent. Because the opponent is generally going to have less counter than you'd expect, maybe hitting at 6000 is stronger. Using this knowledge in the set is very helpful to adapt, and think there are very few blockers. If I were to push really hard on this turn, if he doesn't draw a blocker, I win. Make sure to, for whatever set you're in, look over the commons specifically, and then sometimes the uncommons or rares that exist in the set that can start to sway the decision of your gameplay. Now, with just the vanilla stat line cards, 2000 counters, as well as good event cards, you'll have around maybe close to half of your deck built, give or take. The next thing that you want to put in is these powerful effects. Generally, a lot of the effects are not usable, but some of them are extremely powerful in this format specifically. Even cards with hard to use conditions, assuming they have 1000 counter, can totally fit into a deck because there's maybe a world where you can use the effect, and then at worst, it will still always have a stat line. Something like Niji, for example, if you pull out of a pack, you might feel a bit disappointed because you've used one of your rare slots on a card that's effectively a 5-cost 6000 because it's very hard to reduce your done in the game, and it's not always beneficial to. However, you have to look at the deeper subtext. For instance, with Niji, if you and your opponent are at equal or less dong, then you can activate its effect. What this means is that once you both are at 10 dong, you can use his effect, and a 5-cost 6000 that can bounce any 4-cost or KO a 2-cost, for example, a small blocker, is extremely powerful on the last turns. So looking at the cards that you have and the ways that it can be used in this sort of generally slower format is very useful. And using these powerful stat lines that aren't necessarily vanillas, but close near vanillas, is good to fill out the consistency of your deck. Next, something that we briefly touched upon before, card combos. Now, for example, if you were to have a card that on play plays another card, if the other card is reasonable enough to not feel horrible if you only draw that one side, putting in both can help cheat out characters. In this format, generally people will only be playing one character per turn. On 4, they'll play a 4-cost, 6, they'll play a 6-cost, and then from 8, maybe they'll start to divvy it up. But generally in the early game, you'll be playing one character per turn. What this means is that characters that can be cheated out, for example, on play, playing another character like Jinbe, these kinds of effects are extremely powerful because they help you just establish more board when you shouldn't be able to. On top of this, if there are combos that can cheat don costs, for example, the transformation gimmick in the Reiju package where you have the small ETG and the large ETG, if you do happen to draw this combo, then you're in an amazing spot. And even if you don't, the small ETG on his own still has counter, and the large ETG is still a 7-cost 7000, and when you get to 10 dong, has rush and minus 2000 power. While of course you would never want to put in the small ETG on its own, by having the big ETG as a potential ceiling for play, you can afford to put in these combos that you otherwise may not. One of the other cards that you may not consider when playing in this format are searchers. Now, searchers generally seem like they'd be very awkward because when we make decks with 30 targets for the searcher. But we don't actually need that many targets, especially with a smaller deck. In the One Piece card game, there are largely 3-card, 4-card, and 5-card searches. In this format, I like to have a hit rate of at least 70%. On the Patreon article, you can find exactly how many targets you need for these. The most common search that you'll be using in your decks, the 5-card search. To reach 70% in a 30-card deck, you'll need at least 6 targets, and for a 40-card deck, you would need at least 8 targets. Now, once you've considered all these kinds of vanillas, 2000 counters, events, near vanilla stat lines, strong effects, and potentially searchers, the last couple of cards can be the hardest to decide. Generally, you'll be left with several cards that just all seem bad, but you have to put in something to be able to reach 40 cards in the deck. One suggestion that I have to help pad this out is to just line up your deck, if you haven't already, by cost. In the standard format of the One Piece card game, your curve doesn't matter as much because you get to late game so fast. However, in this format, having something to play on curve is very important because tempo is extremely important. There are very few cards that can win back the board, so you need to make sure that you are maintaining your lead on the board from the beginning. As such, making sure that you have your curve to, if you're going first, ensure that you have sizable 3 costs. If you're going second, make sure that you have enough 4 costs is important to sort of increasing the consistency of your early game. The later game cards you have more time to draw into or search, so we want to put more priority on 3 costs and 4 costs in the deck. Generally, when it comes to choosing first or second, second tends to be, if there were only vanillas in the game, moderately advantaged. The reason for this is because they can play a 4-cost 6000 on 4 dong, and they get extra draw by going second. As there's not much card draw in the game, this extra draw is significant, so going second is generally better. But this does not mean that you should always be choosing to go second. If, for example, you got a lot of 5-cost cards, specifically 5-cost 7000 cards, these cards can actually hit over the vanilla with 7000 power. So if you don't have that many 4 cost 6,000 vanillas, but you have lots of 5 cost 7,000 vanillas, you absolutely should be taking first. There's actually a lot more to talk about on this subject than there were for guides, although I don't know if there was actually a necessity for this kind of guide. However, I do think it's a very interesting topic that not enough people are covering, and I really like the format, so I hope that you guys learned something from this video. Once again, if you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe. I'm editing up the final parts of this and I didn't like my old outro, so I'm recording it at one. And if you would so kindly let me know if this helped you out and helped you win something, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you. I'll see you guys again. Bye bye.